Today, as our federal government continues forcefully to harass and commit violence against the people of Minneapolis and pressures our NATO allies to accept its unwelcome offer to purchase Greenland, threatening them with tariffs as they, aware of recent events in the Caribbean, send troops to defend the island. The government meant to represent us to the world, displaying attitudes as authoritarian as those of the regime in Iran that employs force and cuts off contact with the rest of the world to suppress popular protests, or the regime in Russia that lays dubious claim to Ukraine. Against this dark moment, we light a candle for peace, justice, and freedom.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock, where love is our teaching and service is our prayer. If you're a newcomer, we're glad that you've come today for worship. And while you're here, please stop by the guest table in the foyer to fill out a guest card and pick up some information about the church. Well, today, we know that we are beginning the celebration for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And it invites us to reflect on the power of service, unity, collective responsibility. It challenges us to move beyond the remembrance and into meaningful action that strengthens our community and uplifts those most in need. Through service projects, educational opportunities, and community engagement, we recommit ourselves to the principle of justice, equity, and love that defined Dr. King's mission. This Saturday, our lay ministry team is hosting what we call Conversations About Caring. We are a caring community. We all care for each other. But sometimes it's hard to ask for help. And sometimes it's hard to know what to do when people need help. And so we're going to have a series of conversations to talk about how the appropriate ways, how to ask for help and how to help someone. And it will be this Saturday from 10 to 12 in the Meta Wing in Thompson Hall. I now invite our illuminator, John Mize, to come forward and light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is printed in your order of service.
The lit chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Enlighten it. Let us open our hearts. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to see what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. Please join me for the affirmation of covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its supplement, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
And now for time all together. Woo!
Thank you. Oh, and you're doing
It is my turn again. Sorry. You'll see a little bit more of me. As we were discussing and saying already today, this is a celebratory weekend. We're thinking about Dr. Martin Luther King's history of service to not only his fellows, but to the entire world, and how those ripples go out even when we don't always know where they will land. And so we're going to I wanted to read a short little article, and then we're going to do a song that goes with that. And this article was written in June of 2020, which I also think is very poignant for our talks today. by a journalist named Martin Keelty, and it's called "How the Beatles' Blackbird Took Flight from Racism." In April 2016, Paul McCartney welcomed two special guests backstage at his show in Little Rock, Arkansas. They were more than just Beatles fans. They were the inspiration for one of the band's most distinctive songs, Blackbird, and they inspired the song by simply trying to go to school in the 50s. It was the era of segregation and the beginning of the civil rights movement, following the Second World War, in which black people had been called up to fight for their country's future with as much dedication and bravery as white people. There was a rising desire for change. It didn't come easy. One of the most infamous moments came with the Little Rock crisis of 1957, when 9 black students enrolled in a previously whites-only school. And the resulting images still sting today, while white adults shouting threats and throwing objects at young black girls, including Elizabeth Eckford and Thelma Mothershed Ware, who are accompanied by government bodyguards to protect them from this disgrace. The news, along with reports of many other shameful incidents over the years to follow, traveled the world to Liverpool, where McCartney had yet to co-found the Fab Four. While official segregation never existed in the UK, social discrimination existed loud and clear. The slogan, "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish," is said to have been used by landlords who refused to provide accommodation to certain people, though there's no doubt over whether the phrase was ever really in circulation. However, British class distinction remains a visible form of institutionalized segregation in the world today, and the working class McCartney would have seen it firsthand. Not that it was by any means the same thing as the scenes from America. Those scenes were notable enough to have him thinking about writing a song. It took more than a decade for the idea to crystallize, though the acoustic guitar piece was something he and George Harrison had been playing around with since their earliest times together. Blackbird appeared on the Beatles' White Album in 1968 in a remarkably simplistic production: his voice, guitar, and a basic timekeeping sound for accompaniment. Paul writes, quote, "I was sitting with my acoustic guitar and I'd heard about the civil rights troubles in Alabama, where Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus in 1955, Mississippi, where 3 civil rights activists were executed in 1964, and Little Rock in particular," McCartney told GQ in 2018. "So that was in my mind, and I just thought it would be really good if I could write something that, if it ever reached any of the people going through those problems, it might kind of give them a little bit of hope. So I wrote Blackbird." While other inspirations have been mentioned over the years, the experience of hearing a blackbird sing while he was in India, a personal message to an aunt, the writer was clear about where the idea came from. "In England, a bird is a girl, so I was thinking of a black girl going through this," he said, explaining that the message was, "Now's your time to arise, and set yourself free." One of the nice things about music is that a lot of the people listening to you are going to take seriously what you're saying in the song, McCartney added. "I'm very proud of the fact that the Beatles' output is always really pretty positive. It's always Let It Be, Hey Jude, Blackbird. It's hopefully a good message. And hopefully people out there will listen to it and think, it's not just me alone going through this. It's also something I can fix."
You might have noticed in this world we live in that different people have different perspectives and have different ideas about differences between us, and that our differences of perception sometimes lead to misunderstandings and even conflicts, often because, hoping to make our differences easier to understand, we create categories to sort them out, to organize the complex tangle of human diversity into an orderly array with our differences labeled and, we think, easier to see. Sometimes our categories are too crudely drawn and become stereotypes that actually impede our ability to understand one another accurately and fully. You might have noticed all that about us. And sometimes in the face of real-world practical problems, we need to step back and reconsider our habitual categories. We need a new frame, a new lens that helps us let in a little more real-world complexity and really grasp it. In order to name and analyze a practical, real-world problem in our justice system, that the categories written into our laws sometimes hid unfair practices from our judges' sight, one scholar studying that problem was led to coin a new word to describe what was happening. Let's get the story from the source. Here is Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw with a 5-minute account of how she came to coin the word intersectionality.
Now, the experience that gave rise to intersectionality was my chance encounter with a woman named Emma DeGraffenreid.
I've called intersectionality a new frame or a new lens. Folks familiar with the Christian scriptures already know that Jesus used the metaphor of putting new wine in old wineskins. I mean, even Google AI knows that. It says that Jesus used the parable of new wine and old wineskins to explain that his new teachings and the way of life they implied couldn't fit into the rigid old structures of religious expectations in his day. New wine needs new, flexible wineskins to contain its fermentation and expansion. What a great metaphor for learning and expanding both our consciousness and our understanding, right? Likewise, says Google AI, Jesus' new message required a transformed way of thinking and living. Otherwise, both the new message, the wine, and the old methods, the wineskin, would be ruined. Google AI even capitalized his. A new frame of thought can be disorienting, especially when we use new words like intersectionality to express it. It's always a good idea in such cases to try to understand why someone might consider new words helpful. And I think we just heard one perspective on that. If you hadn't heard Dr. Crenshaw tell that story before, I hope you found it helpful this morning to hear it. Rich though the wine and wineskins metaphor may be, I'm partial to the metaphor of looking through a different lens. Maybe that's because I tend to be a visual learner. Do you know the learning model called VAK? It stands for Visual, Auditory, Kinesthetic. Raise your hand. You heard of that before? Okay, good. Educators use it, but also salesmen. In the course of conversation, when a customer stops to think about how to describe what they want or to decide which options seem best to them, a visual learner will look up in that moment as if comparing two paintings on a wall, looking for the right choice or the right word to express what they want. An auditory learner will look from side to side as though listening for the right choice or the right word. And a kinesthetic learner will look down toward their own body and slightly to the left, as though to feel the best choice. The heart is slightly to the left of center, you know. So do practice your poker face for when you have to go shopping. But I mention that model because it suggests some other ways to ask the question about what to do with the fact that we all have different perspectives and different and maybe unhelpful ideas about each other. For a visual learner, the question might be, what does your world look like to you? For an auditory learner, it might be, where's the harmony and where's the dissonance in your world? And for a kinesthetic learner, it might be, how does the world move with or against you? The new word intersectionality is meant to express the idea that each of us has many identities, or put another way, that each of us has a unique but multifaceted identity. It makes no difference which way you put it. If you want to keep identity in the singular, you're still going to reckon with multiple facets. Whether you call them facets or identities is really beside the point. The point is to recognize both our individual complexity and our human propensity to simplify complexity through categories, or more crudely, through stereotypes, and the impact of that propensity has on how accurately and fully we understand our world and each other. Where in our world we perceive harmonies or dissonances, and how in our experience we find the world moving with or against us. Intersectionality does not convey the whole picture of this new frame of thought, though. The other key feature in it is positionality. Positionality has to do with those old wineskins, our habitual categories of thought, frames of reference, prisms or lenses through which we understand our world and each other, that shape our practices and institutions and interactions and ways of being with each other. The ways we grant or use power, grant or deny privilege, even our awareness of what each other's worlds and lives are like, and how and whether we perceive around us things like fairness or unfairness, justice or injustice, freedom or oppression. Those dimensions of our lives and our diversity are what the idea of positionality tries to shine a light on. It's easy to be confused about such things. Do you remember that moment when then President George W. Bush said, "Hate cannot be overcome by hate. Hate can only be overcome by..." What do you think he said? What do you think he said? No, he said freedom, by which he meant power. See how easy it is to get confused. Some people think freedom means you can exercise your power without any interference from anyone else. Other people think freedom means being liberated from constant interference in your life arising from others' use of their power. This difference of opinion about freedom is shaped both by how others' actions toward us, based on our various facets of identity, affect our lives. That's intersectionality. And by how able we are to exercise our own power based on privilege customarily or systematically granted us or withheld from us. That's positionality. We each experience different currents, different harmonies and dissonances, different assumptions, prejudices, stereotypes, and so forth, impacting us and others in different ways. And this aspect of our life experience shapes how we move and show up in the world and influences our values and how we rank them and even our moral understanding. Sam Ames, like any good professional, says the best antidote to panic is information. If you're a professional, all you need is the information and you know what to do, right? And for us amateurs, I think the best antidote is really to take in others' perspectives. I've spoken before about the Moral Foundations Theory Project, an ongoing social research project where they collect survey data on what values people say they base their moral decisions on. So, like good professionals, they're collecting information to help us stop panicking. Now, what happens when you take surveys? Among other things, you ask people a series of impertinent questions like, how old are you? What gender are you? What race or ethnicity are you? How much formal education do you have? How rich or poor are you? And so on. You ask those things so that you can categorize people, to give you ways to analyze different people's different perspectives according to some conventional categories. So you might be using some old wineskins, familiar but limited frames, accustomed but perhaps distorting lenses as a basis for understanding what people are saying about their values and moral decision-making. Drawing on their surveys, the Moral Foundations Project identifies certain values or pairs of values, like two ends of a spectrum that you're someplace along. And these are what they mean when they speak of foundations. Initially, around the year 2010, they identified 5: fairness, caring, authority, loyalty, and purity. They've since identified more and refined their description of fairness to reflect different ways people surveyed describe what fairness means to them. In that initial report back in 2010, they tried to address what at the time, halfway through President Obama's first term, was a hot topic. How do politically liberal people differ from politically conservative people in the values that guide them? They found that everyone ranks fairness and caring highly, so it is not fair to say you don't care or fairness is not important to you to someone who differs from you politically. Instead, they found those 3 other foundations, authority, loyalty, and purity, complicate things for conservatives because they value those almost as highly as they do fairness and caring, according to the survey data. Whereas liberals do not find authority, loyalty, and purity compelling values on which to base a moral decision, according to the survey data. I'm not aware of any new lens those researchers have applied to ask what accounts for that large difference in attitude toward the importance in moral decision-making of the opinion of an authority, of being loyal to someone or something, or of purity, whatever purity might mean to different people. And we just sang a song about love is at the center. That's about loyalty to a value, isn't it? So there's some work to do there. But what facets of their identity might make a difference to how they understand those values? How do those values play out in their experience, and what is their impact on them, the people who have answered these surveys? This might be a helpful lens for interpreting that data. I'll close with a question to ponder. I'm going to ask you to visualize something before you start pondering the question. Picture a circle that represents your multifaceted identity. Think about the many facets of your identity: race, sex, gender, ethnicity, physical ability, neurodivergence, yes, but also what kind of learner you are, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and what's your Enneagram or Myers-Briggs type, and what kind of music and food and comedy and literature do you most enjoy, and what could you call those facets of yourself? If the center of that circle is a place where some facets of you grant privilege or attract support, affirmation, encouragement, and the edge of that circle is where other facets of you, when perceived by others, cause you to be ignored or marginalized or discouraged or oppressed. Where in the circle would you place the various facets of you? Which ones would be at the center, granting privilege? Which ones would be at the edge, moving against you in some way? Where would you place them? And now think about your constellation of facets, the way the gem of who you are has been carved to sparkle, and how the whole package of who you are affects how does this world move with or against you, where the harmonies and dissonances are in your world and what the world looks like to you. I encourage you to reflect, here's the part to ponder, on all the precious facets of who you are and learn to love them all. And I encourage you to reflect from time to time on how they affect your experience of freedom and power and safety within the intersecting systems of privilege and oppression at work in the world around you. And then reflect on how your neighbor's experience of the world might differ from yours. From these reflections, may more light fall on your understanding, more warmth fill your compassion, and more fuel fire your commitment to peace and justice, love and life. So may it be. Amen.
When John Mize come forward to extinguish our chalice, please join in saying our closing words. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Help the evil. We help the suffering. Honor all beings.
And may the gem that is in you sparkle and shine.